Welcome to our channel. Here we bring you mysteries, forgotten corners of old American history, and untold stories from the past. Every story is filled with suspense, strange events, and secrets hidden in time. So don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to never miss our next mysterious tale from history. Whispers Beneath Deadwood Creek, Part 1. The Sound Beneath the Earth. It was the winter of 1872 when the first rumor reached the mining town of Deadwood Creek, a low, continuous hum that rose from the ground like a living thing. No one could say exactly when it began. Some miners claimed they'd heard it after the last dynamite blast down in Shaft 9. Others swore it started after the thaw, when the snow melted and the creek began to run black with mud and iron. Whatever its origin, by December, the sound was impossible to ignore. The creek lay just south of town, a thin, snake-like strip of water winding through the valley. At night, when the moon sat low and the wind died, the hum came alive, a deep, metallic whisper, like 100 unseen voices breathing through stone. Elias Cooper, the foreman of the Black Ridge Mining Company, didn't believe in ghost stories. He was a practical man, hard-faced, with hands cracked from the cold and years of coal dust settled deep in his nails. But even he had begun to notice things that didn't make sense. Tools left at the pit edge vanished overnight. Horses refused to go near the lower tunnels. And the newest workers, immigrants from Ireland and Bohemia, were whispering of earth spirits that guarded old burial grounds. Cooper laughed it off in the saloon, though he kept a lantern burning by his bedside every night. "It's just the mountains settling," he'd say. "Rocks move, air escapes, sound carries." But deep inside, he wasn't sure. One cold morning in early January, a miner named Samuel Quinn didn't return from the pit. He had gone down before sunrise with 3 others to check the supports in Shaft 9. By noon, only 2 came back. They claimed they'd heard Samuel's pick striking something solid, like metal, not rock. Then there had been a faint ringing sound, followed by a silence that felt heavy as sleep. When they called out, he didn't answer. Cooper sent a team back down. The tunnel walls were damp, the air heavy and metallic. They found Samuel's helmet lying in the mud, the lamp still burning. His pick was half buried in a vein of black stone, but there was no body. The strange part wasn't that he was gone. Miners died all the time, but the stone he struck, it wasn't like anything they had ever seen. Dark as coal, but shining like glass, warm to the touch, and when hit, it gave off a faint hum. That night, the sound under the ground grew louder. Men in the bunkhouses woke to find their lanterns flickering, though there was no wind. One claimed he heard footsteps beneath the floorboards, soft and rhythmic, keeping time with the hum. By dawn, half the camp refused to go back to work. The company doctors suggested a buildup of gases, methane perhaps, that could cause auditory hallucinations. Cooper wanted to believe him, but when he stood by the creek that evening, he felt the vibration in his boots. It wasn't just sound, it was movement, like the earth breathing. A week later, Father O'Malley, the old Irish priest who tended to the miners' chapel, came to see him. He brought an old leather-bound book, the cover flaking with age. "I've seen this before. Not here. Back home, near Galway. Men digging in the wrong ground, places that were never meant to be opened." He turned a page, showing an illustration of a circle of stones and strange symbols carved into the earth. "They called them sleepin' mouths, gates beneath the hills. The old tribes believed the earth was alive, and there were places where it could whisper back." Cooper frowned. "You're saying Samuel fell into a fairy tale?" O'Malley's eyes were sharp. I'm saying there are things buried that don't belong to men, and when you strike 'em with iron, they remember the sound. That night, a snowstorm rolled in from the west. By midnight, the entire camp was blanketed in white. The creek had frozen over, yet beneath the ice, the faint hum continued, muffled but steady. Cooper stood by the window of his cabin, watching the snow pile against the panes. Somewhere in the darkness, a lantern moved between the trees, one of the night guards, he assumed. But then another appeared, and another. 3 lights, moving slowly in a line toward the creek. He stepped outside, the wind cutting against his face. "Who's out there?" he called. No answer. The lights reached the creek and stopped. For a moment, everything went still. Then, suddenly, one by one... Part 2. The Hollow Men of Shaft 9. The sun rose late over Deadwood Creek that morning, pale and cold, casting long shadows across the frozen valley. The hole in the ice where the night guard had vanished was already crusted with frost again, as if the earth itself wanted to seal the memory shut. Elias Cooper hadn't slept. He stood by the creek, boots half buried in snow, staring at the black patch beneath the ice that still shimmered faintly in the morning light. The hum was quieter now, distant, like a voice behind a wall, but it was there, always there. Behind him, the miners whispered in uneasy clusters. No one dared step close. "Could be gas," one said. "Maybe he fell through and froze. Gas doesn't make a perfect circle, and it sure as hell don't burn ice from underneath." Cooper turned. "Enough talk. We've lost 2 men. I'm not losing a third. We seal Shaft 9 till we know what we're dealing with." A few nodded in relief, others in silent fear. But even as they began boarding up the mine entrance, the sound under the earth throbbed again, once, twice, a heavy vibration that made the planks tremble in their hands. That night, the town's only tavern, the Drunken Lantern, was quieter than usual. The laughter was gone. Even the piano sat untouched. Only the crackle of fire broke the silence. At one corner table sat Sheriff Cal Whitaker, a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes. He'd been sheriff of Deadwood for 6 years, long enough to know when fear was about to boil over. "You're sitting on something bigger than you're saying," he told Cooper, sipping his whiskey. "Men don't vanish in straight lines into the snow without reason." Cooper rubbed his face. "You heard the hum?" Whitaker nodded slowly. "I hear it. So does everyone. Question is, what the devil's making it?" Before Cooper could answer, the saloon door creaked open. Father O'Malley stepped in, snow still clinging to his coat. He carried something wrapped in cloth, small and heavy. He laid it on the table between them. "I found this near the creek," he said softly. Cooper unwrapped it. Inside was a metal shard, black and glassy like the stone from the mine. But this one was jagged, and along one edge ran symbols, not letters, not numbers, more like crude spirals and lines carved by something with claws instead of hands. Whitaker leaned closer. "Hell's that?" O'Malley's lips tightened. "It's old. Older than this land, maybe. The markings, they match the ones I showed you in that book." Cooper exhaled slowly. "The sleeping mouths?" The priest nodded. "A place where the earth remembers its dead." The next morning, despite Cooper's orders, 2 miners broke the board sealing Shaft 9. They claimed they wanted to recover Samuel Quinn's tools, but truth be told, they were curious, and greed has a way of drowning fear. By midday, they hadn't returned. Cooper gathered a small team, himself, Whitaker, and 3 of his most trusted men, and descended into the shaft. The tunnel was cold, damp, and silent, except for the faint drip of water from the ceiling. Their lamps cast trembling halos of light over the rock walls. Halfway down, Whitaker stopped. "You feel that?" It was faint at first, a vibration in the soles of their boots. Then came the hum again, deep and resonant, vibrating through the air like the slow beating of some unseen heart. They reached the lower chamber, where the strange black stone vein still glimmered faintly. Samuel's pick was still there, rusted now, and beside it, footprints, but not the kind that should have been there. They were bare, human-shaped but smaller, and pressed deep into the mud as if by something heavy yet light. The prints circled the pick, then disappeared into the darkness beyond the torchlight. Whitaker raised his gun. "We ain't alone down here." The hum rose, sharper this time, turning into something that almost sounded like breathing. Cooper motioned to move back. "We're leaving. Now." As they turned, one of the miners, Jacob, let out a sharp cry. His lamp had caught something at the far end of the chamber, a shape half buried in the dirt. They hurried over. At first it looked like a body, but when they brushed away the soil, what they found froze them all. It wasn't flesh. It was a hollow shell of a man, perfectly shaped, skin gray and dry like old clay. The eyes were empty sockets, the mouth open in a silent scream. When Whitaker touched it with the barrel of his gun, the figure collapsed into dust. Jacob whispered, "That's Samuel. His tag is still on the coat." Before they could speak again, the hum changed, growing louder, sharper, like something awakening. The black stone in the walls began to glow faintly red, pulsing in rhythm. Then came the whisper, not loud, not human, but many voices, overlapping, rising from the very walls around them, words no one understood. Whitaker shouted, "Run!" They stumbled back toward the tunnel entrance. Behind them, the glow spread through the rock like fire under glass. The whispers turned to screams, not of anger, but of hunger. Just before they reached the surface, the earth trembled violently. A crack split open near the tunnel mouth, and a blast of hot air surged upward, smelling of iron and decay. They spilled out into the snow, coughing, gasping, the mine entrance collapsing behind them with a thunderous roar. When the dust cleared, the hum was gone. Only silence remained. That night, no one slept. The miners barricaded themselves in their shacks. Some began packing to leave by dawn. Cooper sat by the dying fire, staring at the shard Father O'Malley had brought. Under the flicker of
Part 3. The Forgotten Chamber. 3 days had passed since the collapse of Shaft 9. Deadwood Creek had gone eerily still, too still. The hum had faded, yet the silence it left behind felt heavier than sound itself. Half the miners had packed up and left by dawn, their wagons creaking down the frozen road that cut through the valley. The ones who stayed behind spoke little, their eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Elias Cooper hadn't left his cabin since the cave-in. He hadn't told anyone what they saw down there. Not the whispers, not the glowing stone, not the hollow body that crumbled to dust. Some things were better left unspoken. Yet one thought refused to leave him. The carvings on that black shard. They weren't random. They were a message, a warning maybe. And deep down, Cooper knew he hadn't sealed anything. He'd only woken it. On the fourth morning, Father O'Malley came again, his face pale and drawn. He carried not one, but 2 books, the second older than the first, bound in what looked like disturbingly stitched leather. "Cooper," he said gravely, "I found something you need to see." The priest laid the book open on the table. Inside were yellowed pages filled with hand-drawn maps and faded ink, references to unholy wells, buried gates, and songs beneath the mountains. This was written by a missionary in 1791. He recorded the tribes that once lived here, the Lakota, the Arikara, and another, one that vanished long before the rest. He called them the Hollow Men. Cooper frowned. That's what we found in the mine. Hollow. The priest nodded slowly. They believed that when men dug too deep into the sleeping mouths of the earth, their souls could be taken out, hollowed out, leaving only skin behind. The body remains, but the voice becomes part of the ground. Cooper stared at him. You think that's what's been happening? The priest's gaze dropped to the floor. I think the miners broke a seal that wasn't meant to be broken. Outside, a snow wind howled through the streets. Sheriff Whitaker burst in, his coat dusted with frost. You'd best come with me. There's something you need to see. They followed him down toward the creek. The ice had begun to melt around the edges, though the temperature hadn't risen. Steam rose faintly from the water's surface. And on the far bank, someone had drawn symbols in the snow, the same spirals and lines carved into the black stone. They weren't here this morning, and there ain't been a soul near this bank all day, Whitaker said. O'Malley crossed himself. They're calling. Cooper crouched beside the markings. The lines weren't made by a stick or boot. They were burned into the snow, as if drawn by heat. And beneath his feet, faint but certain, came the hum again. That night, Cooper couldn't shake the sound. It was different now, softer, slower, almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat buried beneath the world. He sat by the fire until the candles burned low. Then, in the quiet, he heard it, a knock. Once, twice, from under the floorboards. He froze. The sound came again, gentle, deliberate. He grabbed his lantern, crouched down, and pulled open the trap door to the cellar. The air that drifted out was cold and damp, heavy with the scent of wet soil. He descended slowly. The lantern light wavered over barrels and crates, all ordinary, until he saw the far wall. The stone there was different, blacker, smoother. He reached out and touched it, warm. Suddenly, the hum surged, rising through his bones. He stumbled back as the stone seemed to breathe, its surface pulsing faintly. He rushed upstairs, slamming the trapdoor shut. Whatever lay beneath Deadwood Creek had reached his home. By dawn, Cooper had made his decision. They had to find where it began, before the next man vanished. O'Malley brought maps and old records from the mission archives. Together, they traced the creek upstream, past the mining camp, to a place once called Crow Hollow Ridge, an area marked unsuitable for settlement. The priest pointed to a note scrawled in the margin. Here the ground sings without wind, and the dead do not stay. That's where we go, Cooper said. Whitaker loaded his rifle. If there's something in those hills, I want eyes on it. The three men set out before noon. The trail was narrow, the snow deep and silent. No birds, no wind, not even the sound of the creek. After an hour's climb, they reached a plateau where the land dropped sharply into a gorge, and there, half hidden by brush and frost, was a stone circle, 12 black pillars, each carved with those same spirals. At the center lay a pit, wide, deep, and dark.
Part 4. The Awakening of Deadwood Creek. By the time the sun rose over the ridge, The air above Deadwood Creek had changed. It was warmer, unnaturally so, and the snow near the creek had begun to melt in long, dark streaks that streamed faintly in the cold morning light. No one was working the mines anymore. The bunkhouses stood empty, windows frosted over. The few who'd stayed in town kept their shutters locked, whispering prayers behind closed doors. But Elias Cooper didn't leave. He stood on the hill above the creek, watching the valley below, watching the dark line of warmth crawl slowly down from Crow Hollow Ridge toward the water. It looked like blood under ice. Behind him, Father O'Malley leaned heavily on a cane. His hand was still bandaged from where the gray thing had touched him. The wound hadn't healed. The skin had turned black around the spiral mark. "Whatever they were, they're not done," he said hoarsely. Cooper's eyes never left the valley. "Then neither are we." They returned to the old mission church, the only stone building in Deadwood, and spread the old maps and books across the altar. The candles flickered, their flames bending toward the door as if drawn by the same unseen pull that haunted the ground. O'Malley turned to a passage written in faded ink. "The hollow ones guard the deep mouth. They feed when the mountain breathes. Their song is the call of return." Cooper frowned. Return to what? The priest looked up, his eyes hollow. "To the beginning, to the time before men came." Outside, a low rumble passed through the ground, faint at first, then stronger, rattling the pews. Dust drifted from the rafters. Whitaker burst in, rifle in hand. "They're back," he shouted. "By the creek, the ground's moving." They ran out into the open. A crowd had gathered by the frozen bank, pointing and shouting. The ice was cracking, splitting down the middle like a wound reopening. Steam hissed upward, carrying with it that old familiar hum, louder now, clearer, no longer just a vibration. It was a voice, or rather, many voices, soft, layered, whispering the same low chant again and again, a rhythm that made the air itself tremble. Whitaker stared, speechless. It's talking." O'Malley gripped his cross. "No, it's remembering." Suddenly, the ground near the creek burst open. Mud and water sprayed high, and from the crater rose something, not a creature, not entirely human, but a shape of gray clay, its surface slick with black water. The crowd screamed. Some ran, others froze. Cooper raised his lantern. The shape turned its face toward him, a face he recognized. "Samuel," he whispered. It was Samuel Quinn, the missing miner, but his skin was wrong, stretched thin and smooth like wet stone, eyes hollow, mouth open as if singing, though no sound came. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Each step left a print that steamed in the snow. Whitaker lifted his rifle. "Don't move!" He fired. The bullet struck Samuel's chest, but instead of piercing, it sunk in, swallowed by the gray flesh. No blood, no reaction. Samuel only tilted his head and extended a hand toward Cooper. Behind him, the ground bulged again, more figures rising, shapes of men and women, their forms half-formed, like statues still being sculpted by unseen hands. They came not in rage, but in procession, walking toward the town in eerie silence. Cooper and Whitaker retreated to the church, barring the doors. The hum filled the valley, now pulsing through the very walls. O'Malley knelt by the altar, whispering in Latin, but his voice shook. His hand, the one with the mark, was glowing faintly beneath the bandage. Cooper grabbed him by the shoulders. "There must be a way to stop it." The priest gasped. "The writings, they say the gate must be sealed with its own heart." "What does that mean?" O'Malley's breath came in ragged bursts. "The stone, the black stone from the mine. It's part of the mouth, a fragment. If we return it, the gate may sleep again." Cooper looked toward the back of the church, where the shard still lay wrapped in cloth. Even through the fabric, it pulsed faintly with red light. He picked it up. It was warm, almost hot. Whitaker grabbed his coat. "You can't go out there." Cooper met his eyes. "If we don't, there won't be a town left to save." They stepped out into the storm of sound. The entire valley was shaking now. The creek had become a churning pit of black water, glowing faintly from beneath. The hollow men stood along the banks, dozens of them, motionless, heads tilted upward, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Cooper moved slowly down the hill, clutching the shard. As he neared the edge, the hum grew louder, pressing into his skull, into his bones, filling his vision with red light. He felt it calling him, not with words, but with memory. For a moment he saw flashes, miners striking the first blow, the black stone bleeding light, Samuel's scream, and then something deeper. Ancient fires, men kneeling before stone mouths, voices chanting in a language older than time. The ground beneath him opened, revealing the same black glassy rock glowing like molten iron. He raised the shard above his head. "You want it back?" he shouted into the roar. "Then take it!" He drove it down into the earth. For a moment, nothing. Then, a blinding surge of red light burst upward, followed by a sound, a single deep tone that echoed through the valley like a bell from the bottom of the world. The hollow